Welcome back to the Soul Relationship series. At Soul, we study how life moves and how people change, or we try to. And in this series, we are talking about actually how relationships change, and that they do. It's been 5 or 6 months since I have done one of these audio blogs. You know how it is when you get interrupted with something and it's just hard to get back to doing it? Well, that sort of happened over the summer, and now it's November. But our last audio blog was about what I call the breathing relationship, and how relationships not only are kind of alive, but they breathe. And I regretted after I did it that I didn't read this poem in that last blog. But I thought I would open up with it today as kind of a review and add one more poem today to get us into what we're going to be talking about today, which is relationship endings. This poem is by Robert Bly, is called The Third Body, and it's about the body of our relationships. A man and a woman sit near each other, and they do not long at this moment to be older or younger, or born in any other nation, or any other time, or any other place. They are content to be where they are, talking or not talking. Their breaths together feed someone whom we do not know. The man sees the way his fingers move. He sees her hands close around a book she hands to him. They obey a third body that they share in common. They have promised to love that body. Age may come, parting may come, death will come. A man and a woman sit near each other. As they breathe, they feed someone we do not know, someone we know of, whom we have never seen. In this series, we've been looking at relationships as living things, and the formation of this third body that Robert Bly is talking about. It's breathing, that thing that animates us, that's bigger than the sum of our parts. We talked in the last time about how if they're healthy and they're in constant states of change, moving toward and away, they change forms over time, which means that things in them die. And we have talked about how lasting, satisfying connections have a kind of structure that helps energy move well between people, that helps them endure. And that was a lot. But today we're going to go even further and talk about 4 other things. And the first one I'm going to name is that all relationships end, and they're also forever. Robert Bly says, death will come, parting may come, age may come. Endings, the second thing is that endings are different. They can be good or bad. Good ones usually leave us with a sense of meaning and support, but bad ones don't. The third thing, that we can learn to do good endings. And the fourth, that we can even learn to heal less than good endings after they're over. And we'll mainly talk about that next week, but it takes a little know-how. So I'm also going to quote Stephen Jenkinson today in opening up the first point that I made, which is all relationships end. And here's Stephen in Grief Walker talking, where he says, you don't love anybody until you love their end. You don't love being married until you love the end of the marriage too, because the marriage includes its end. Of course it does. And that's what you have to learn to love. Not accept. Accept is too neutral. You have to love it. That's really active. You have to say yes to that. So how do we deal with this idea that our relationships, at least on some levels, are not forever? They're temporary, They're temporal. And that's all actually part of love. That kills the first immature illusion in relationships that they'll last forever in a particular form and always be there for you. The art of relationship is realizing that people cannot stay put for us for an entire lifetime, being just what we expect them to be. Staying in place, staying alive even, staying well, staying beautiful, staying anything. Or, trying to do that, they themselves will start to die. All relationships are limited and they're forever. How do we hold that? Antonio Machado, who I often quote, a beautiful piece of one of his poems, says, "All things die, and all things live forever. But our task is to die making roads over the sea." Our task. Our task is learning to love our limitations and kind of build a bridge over them. There's a kind of coming out of denial here. Our contracts, for example, all will end. And let's sit with the facts. You will lose your spouse, or your spouse will lose you if you're married. You don't know how long any particular form of a relationship will last. That's, very uncomfortable if you like things to stay in place. So that brings us to the second point. So if every form of a relationship ends, does it matter how it ends? Are there better and worse endings? Can we accept endings and look at how they end? Can we impact it? Well, just take a moment to think about this. Bring to mind 2 endings in your life. We end things all the time, right? 2 endings that you have had with people. One that was maybe traumatic. We've all had those. And then one that was what we might call, a good ending. Just try to find them. And find what was the difference between them. Feel those 2 endings in your body. I bet your body responds differently to one than the other when you even think about it. And you could stop the tape right now and make a few notes about that and what the difference was between them. And that's an important exercise to do. If you're like me and the people I see, the bad endings are often abrupt, unprocessed, and confusing. There is something in them that doesn't quite resonate as truth. They often come with strong physical symptoms, chest pain, lethargy, anxiety, an inability to function for a time. There may be long-term effects on health or our ability to trust other people that linger on. It's amazing to me how much people in our time consider this to be the definition of what an ending just is: trauma. And sadly, that's just how we've decided to do our endings in our culture. I'm thinking of the standard HR policy, which is to take people out the back door after 30 years and not let them say goodbye. That's a very traumatic ending. Pick your stuff up later. We're done with you. But think about the good ending for a minute. How is that different? There is a difference. And that brings us to point 3. You can learn the steps of good ending and practice them. Whether you learn it in the Ira Byock way of the 5 things people say at death, or the Ho'oponopono practice from the Hawaiian healing tradition, they're the same. They're essentially just manners. And they involve about 5 things over and over again, cross-culturally, from family to family, and relationship to relationship. What are they? And I always teach this. What are they? What do you think they are? Well, the first one is, of course, gratitude. Thank you. We have to acknowledge that we're closing something with somebody to say thank you for it. It's complete. And I learned something, gained something, you gave me something. Of course, there's an I'm sorry for things sometimes. Acknowledging places we may have come up short with the other person. They may have come up short with you. Can you forgive them? So there's forgiveness. There's acknowledgement that love has happened, and the sentence, I love you, often gets said in good endings. Something will endure, and that is love. And finally, the last thing is really the giving of the blessing, right? I bless you on your journey that's separate than mine, I often say, or goodbye, complete, closed for now. I wish you well. Those are the elements of the Ho'oponopono prayer, and they have been proved over centuries to be healing. You can even, point number 4, heal endings that didn't go so well. And we're really going to be talking about that in our next blog about the afterlife of relationships. We live in a culture that over-idealizes love, looks for perfection, predictability, sees relationship endings and even their necessary changing as failures. And all of this produces totally unnecessary suffering. Everybody that I know of wants to live in the house of relationship, right? To be sheltered in that house. But very few people really want to take the time to build a really good foundation for that house, or even construct it well. There are quite a few collapses in all of our contemporary lives because of this, and they're really painful. But I really do think we can learn to build the house of relationship better than we do, which is what we talked about in our blogs 1 through 5. And we can loosen our grip just a little to let them breathe. We talked about that in blog 5. And if they end, which they will, we can do our endings better, which sometimes, weirdly, reinvents the entire relationship in some more vital way. Relationships end, they change, good or bad, they complete, and they also never end, really. And so what does happen in the space after someone leaves us or stops talking or dies after a breakup or a falling out, that's a significant space too, a place of grief or of healing or of integration. And what do we do with it? We'll be looking more at that space in our next blog. And I promise you, I won't take 6 months to post it. If you've been listening to the end, thank you. May your relationships be well all the way to their end and after. And may you be well until the next time we meet here again on YouTube.